Hi students, welcome to Easy Elimu Learning Simplified. My name is Mbide, and in today's session, we're going to look at sentences, specifically complex sentences. In the previous session, we learned about compound sentences. We learned how to identify coordinate clauses, and we also learned about what coordinating conjunctions are and how to identify them in a sentence. So in this lesson, we're going to focus on complex sentences. You're going to define what a complex sentence is, what makes up a complex sentence, and how to pick out different clauses in a complex sentence. So before we get into it, it is important to remind ourselves what a sentence is. And we said a sentence is a group of words that make complete sense. We also said that a sentence begins with a capital letter and ends with either a full stop, a comma, or a question mark. So maybe when you say, I am going home, that is a sentence because number one, it makes sense. Number two, it begins with a comma. And number three, it has ended with a full stop. And the same case applies to the other example there. I enjoy studying. So you may be asking yourself, what is a complex sentence? So a complex sentence is a sentence that is made up of a main clause and a subordinate clause. A main clause is also known as an independent clause, and that means that it is a clause that can stand on its own and make sense, while a subordinate clause, also known as a dependent clause, cannot make sense on its own. It needs the main clause for it to make sense. It is important to note that a complex sentence can have more than one subordinate clause. Just like in compound sentences, where we say that the clauses that make up a compound sentence are joined together by coordinating conjunctions. It is the same for complex sentences. However, the conjunctions that join together complex sentences are not called coordinating conjunctions. They are called subordinating conjunctions. These conjunctions join subordinate clauses. And we are going to have a look at some examples of these subordinating conjunctions. So some examples of subordinating conjunctions include after, although, as, before, if, since, that, because, till, until, while, though, unless, and when. So anytime you see them in a sentence, they are most likely joining together some subordinate clauses. So from the definition, we said that complex sentences are sentences that are made up of a main clause and one or more subordinate clauses. So we are going to look at examples of complex sentences that are made up of the main clause and only one subordinate clause. I have not played football since I hurt my knee. So you start by identifying the subordinating conjunction first. In this case, it is since. The main clause, I have not played football. So you see, I have not played football can make sense on its own, right? So that is the main clause. Since is the subordinating conjunction. I hurt my knee is the subordinate clause. So you see this part of I hurt my knee does not make sense on its own and requires the main clause for it to make sense. Sometimes you can find a sentence that starts with the subordinate clause. So that same sentence, since I hurt my knee, I have not played football. So if you're starting your sentence with the subordinate clause, make sure you put a comma after the clause. So, since I hurt my knee, comma, I have not played football. So it is possible in some cases to start your sentence with the subordinate clause. The second sentence, Wanjala cannot go to Masai Mara because he goes to school. So the first thing is to identify the subordinating conjunction because, and then we identify the main clause or the independent clause. Wanjala cannot go to Masai Mara, and the subordinate clause, he goes to school. And lastly, when I opened the door, I saw a stranger standing there. This is a sentence that has started with the subordinate clause, and the conjunction here is when. The subordinating clause is when I opened the door, and the main clause is I saw a stranger standing there. So let us also have a look at a complex sentence that has the main clause and more than one subordinate clause. While we were waiting for the bus, an old man came and joined us, although we did not know him. So, while we were waiting for the bus, that is the first subordinate clause. An old man came and joined us. That is the main clause. Although we did not know him, that is the second subordinate clause. The children were hesitant to let in the man because they did not know him, although he claimed to know them. The children were hesitant to let in the man. That is the main clause. Because they did not know him, that is the first subordinate clause. Although he claimed to know them, that is the second subordinate clause. You realize that these subordinate clauses are introduced by subordinating conjunctions. So for easier identification of these clauses, it is important to first identify the subordinating conjunction. And lastly, many people will walk to their homes after they finish their work, although it will be late. Many people will walk to their homes. That is the main clause. After they finish their work, that is the first subordinate clause. It has been introduced by the subordinating conjunction after. Although it will be late is the second subordinate clause, which has been introduced by the subordinating conjunction although. So I hope you have understood and you are now able to distinguish between compound sentences and complex sentences. You're able to define a complex sentence and you're able to also construct a complex sentence with one subordinate clause and with more than one subordinate clause. So for further practice, you can have a look at the quiz. There are two parts. The first one is Join the sentences below with the subordinating conjunction given in brackets. And the second part is indicate whether the clause in bold is a main clause or a subordinate clause. So, like the first one, Kibet did not attend college as his three siblings did. So the clause in bold is his three siblings did. That clause that does not make sense on its own, and that is a subordinate clause. So you can have a look at the rest. Thanks for tuning in and see you in the next session.